So now let's talk about the basic syntax of CSS. We already know what CSS is now, so let's delve into it. Now, CSS from the W3C has certain types of rules that governs how each of these styling or declaration that we have applies to the HTML elements or any classes or IDs that we create. Now, a CSS rule consists of a selector and a declaration block. So from what you see over here, we have the CSS syntax, which is represented this way. So we have the selector, which is this one. In this case, the selector is H1, and the declaration. So from here, we have the declaration is made up of the property and also the value of that particular property. So in this case, we have the property to be color, and the value is blue. And the font size property, which is that the whole of this is another declaration. We have the font size property and a value of 12 pixels. Now, per our indication, this means that look out for H1 tag or H1 element on the web page where this CSS is attached to, then change the color to blue. Then the font size of that particular H1 changes to 12 pixels. So now you can see this is an example of a selector. So the selector points to the HTML element you want to style. The declaration block contains one or more declaration separated by a semicolon. So these are very important. So this is one declaration, another declaration. You can have as many declarations as possible, but they always would have to be in curly braces, as you see over here. We will delve much more into how we attach CSS to our styles. There are different ways of doing that. So this is a typical example of a CSS for a paragraph. So this, as you can see here, there is a paragraph tag or element, and we've applied the color red to the paragraph tag and also aligned the text to be centered. So this is an example of how a CSS for paragraph element is shown. So again, for the selector, so a CSS selector selects the element you want to style. So whichever element or tag that you want to style, assuming if it is P tag, you can style it. If it is the A tag, you can style it. If it is the image tag, you can style it. Excuse me. All right, so the CSS selector are used to find or select the HTML element we want to style. We can divide a CSS selector into 5 main categories. So there are 5 ways of classifying some of these selectors. Now the first one is a simple selector. So in this case, it targets the element which is based on the name of that particular element. If there is an ID that has been specified within the element, it can target that ID, and of course, it can also target a class if the ID is not used for that particular element. Now, a combinator selector, as the name says, combinator selectors. So it selects element based on specific relationship with them. So it can combine 2 or more elements in that way, or selectors in that way. The pseudo class selector selects element based on certain state. Of course, we will talk about how these classes are and how we can create an ID tag for maybe CSS for maybe one particular tag. And of course, we also have the pseudo element selector, select and style a particular type of element. And finally, we have the attribute selector, which selects element based on the attribute or the value that is given. These have been outlined over here. So this is an example of the element selector HTML based on the element name. So in this case, the name that we have is the P tag. So here, all the P tags. So from here, this is the CSS that has been classified, that we have declared. So we have the selector, we have the declaration in there, which is found in the curly braces. So it looks out for all P tag on the page and center that particular P tag and also give a color of red. So this is how this CSS element selector works. For ID, whenever we create IDs, we'll start with the dollars, the hashtag. We'll use the hashtag to select them. There are other ones. If you're looking out for classes to use the full stop, we'll talk about each one of these. There are universal selectors that are also available, and in such cases, the CSS rule will affect every element on the page. So most of the time, once we have the star, so just like in your SQL class, whenever you say select star, it means you want to select all the attributes together with the tuples that are available within that particular table. So the star rule will affect all elements which is found on the page. Of course, you have the grouping and all of that. So from here we have H1, H2, and P. Each of them have the text align center and color red. So in a case like this, we don't just we can group all of these because they have the same declaration in here. So we can group all of them into something that looks similar to it, like this one. So we have H1, H2, and P, and they all have the same declaration that is shown from here. Now, there are other things that we would have to go into. So in the next slide, I will go through how we can attach our CSS to our HTML document.